Holcomb was fresh from a performance over at Webster University. They showed that they had music from the big house, a very wonderful presentation there. So, welcome.
Thank you. This is going to be a little different. I'm not going to be talking about traditional teachings, but I'm going to be. I was asked to talk about Insdie Dharma as an example of engaged Buddhism. So what is engaged Buddhism, or sometimes it's called socially engaged Buddhism? This was really a term that was coined by Thich Nhat Hanh, a Vietnamese Zen priest and teacher who many of you have heard of, I'm sure. But during the Vietnam War, he witnessed the suffering in his homeland and wanted to do something to help. And being the inspiring person that he is, he recruited many others and did much in a nonviolent way to address the suffering in Vietnam during the war. Others were leaders in this idea of using Buddhist practice, Buddhist teachings, applying these to social, economic, environmental, and political issues. Bernie Glassman in New York, Dalai Lama, Zen Master Cheng Yen in Taiwan. There are many examples. And here in St. Louis, many of the, if not all, of the Buddhist communities participate in various ways in addressing social, environmental issues. So Insdie Dharma is not unique, but it's an example. So I'll talk about it a little bit. It was started by Kaylin McAllister, who many of you may know, and as I understand it, she received some letters to the Missouri Zen Center from prisoners, and started responding to some of the prisoners who were asking questions about Buddhism, about meditation practice, hoping that they could that this would help them. So she started correspondence with several of these people, but the letters kept coming in, and she realized that she was going to have a newsletter in order to respond to the number of people that she was trying to correspond with. So she did. She started a newsletter, and one thing led to another, and now over 600 copies of this are distributed every 2 months to not only prisoners in the Missouri, but also in other parts of the United States. And being industrious as she was, she set up a 501c3 corporation, and then there were other needs that became apparent. People in Missouri were wanting meditation practice in the prisons. So volunteers would go out and do meditation groups, lead meditation groups in the prisons, and Kaylin participated in that. And then as time went on, some of the people that she'd been corresponding with started getting out of prison, as they will. And then there were other needs. People getting out of prison, some of them, the fortunate few, have family support, but many of them have very little, if any, support. Having, burned bridges in the past. So they may get out of prison with one set of clothes and a little bit of change in the pocket and a one-way bus pass, and that's about it. So a second set of clothes is an obvious need. looking for a job. It's difficult to find employment if it's hard for people to get a hold of you. Having a cell phone for a month or two can help in that regard. Many of you may not be aware that there is a release center just north of the Arch that houses over 500 people who are either on parole or on probation and are trying to achieve a home plan. They're trying to find a place to live and a job. And the release center is located right next to the waterfront in a fairly isolated part of St. Louis. So in order to get to Central City, it's a long walk. So people have benefited from bicycles. So getting donated bicycles to individuals. And some of you have participated in that part of the program here. It can be a tremendous value to allow people to try to put their lives back together. And then the people who had meditation groups in the prison felt a certain loss when they got out of prison because there wasn't that community anymore. So a meditation group was started at a time and place that was accessible for people from the release center and from other areas downtown, so that there could be a meditation community for people coming out of prison. And it was open to all. And it's resulted in kind of a curious mix. For instance, on Saturdays, we have people coming who have maybe dropped out of high school and spent over half of their lives in prison, and they're sitting silently in meditation with graduate students from WashU or from UMSL or people who happen to wander in. And it is really moving to me to see that. It reinforces the universal applicability of the Buddha's methods and teaching. I don't, some of you may not be aware of how many people are actually in prison. 1 out of 100 adults in the United States is in prison, and 1 out of 31 are either in prison, on parole, or on probation. We have the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world. We have 5% of the population in the U.S. and 25% of the prisoners. So there are a lot of people out there in this situation. And it's difficult to put a life back together, and inspiring when people are making an effort to do so. I have a little story, which some of you may relate to, some of you will not. But I think about it from time to time. I was privileged in one way. My parents, whereas they weren't wealthy, they did pay a lot of attention to education. That was a big emphasis in my family. So by the time I was having my 16th birthday, I was in college, away at college. And I was, as it turned out, smart enough, but not any more mature than other people that age, perhaps even a little less so. And I remember one occasion where I wandered with some friends into a party in a graduate student's apartment where they had hashish that was much stronger than anything I'd ever encountered before, along with a refrigerator full of beer. Well, about halfway through that evening, I guess, the graduate student whose apartment it was thought that I looked like one of the soberest people in the room, and he handed me his ID and his keys, and he said, why don't you go out and get some more beer? Well, to the intoxicated adolescent brain, that sounded like a good idea, because, you know, I like to drive, so I got out the door and finally found his car in the parking garage and went driving out and finally found the liquor store and came back with a case of beer. But what occurred to me later, actually much later, is that story could have ended much differently. I very, very easily could have hit a pedestrian, you know, out driving around like that. That pedestrian could have had a brain injury and died. And instead of coming back with a case of beer, I would have been facing a grieving family and a vehicular homicide charge that could have meant that I would be in prison instead of going to medical school. You know, sometimes we think there's a great gulf between us, the law-abiding people, and prisoners, but it can be a razor-thin line at times. And I think about that. So, Insdie Dharma really, I don't, the term engaged Buddhism bothers me a little bit because I think it's all Buddhism. It grew organically. It grew from one person identifying a need, responding to it, and inspiring others to identify other needs and respond to them. The Zen teacher Uchiyama Roshi is someone whose books I enjoy reading, and he often says, everyone you encounter is your life. And just taking care of your life, that is the Buddha way. To me, engaged Buddhism is sort of part of that. Thank you.